aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. So, today's video is about one of the three parts of the human soul according to Kabbalah. So the past couple of lives I've been talking about these three aspects of the soul, the human soul. The lower aspect is known as the NEPHESCH, and this equates to the animal soul. This is the part of you that is responsible for the body that reincarnates time after time. Now, the goal of experiencing life as a human is to evolve that soul into the next two levels. The second level is the human ego, self-awareness. This is what separates the human animal from the wild animal. And this is what a lot of people are here currently developing and evolving. The third level of the soul, and by the way, that second level is called the ruach. The third level of the soul is called the neshama. And this is the God aspect. This is what we are all working toward achieving union with, right? So today's video is to talk about the importance of the animal soul and how working together with all these different parts is what actually leads to enlightenment, awakening, or whatever you want to call it. So, peace to everyone who is currently present. Peace Timon Timon. Peace Alex Cuckoo. Peace Jason. Okay, so just as a quick recap, those are the three aspects of the soul. The Nephesh, which is the animal soul, the Ruach, which is self-awareness, the human aspect, and the third aspect of the soul is called the Neshama. This is the God soul. This is what we're all hoping to unlock and awaken and connect with. Now, what I stated in recent videos is that this scheme can be found across the board in ancient spiritual teachings. Specifically, this particular channel over the years has gone over the Vedic information from ancient India. And what the Vedic information teaches is that there are three aspects to everything that exists within nature. And those three aspects are known as the gunas. And what we can find here are that the three gunas are Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. You might also recognize this as generator, operator, destroyer. Now, I want to emphasize that this does not mean good and bad. These are just the three functions of nature, okay? Everything in nature is going to operate through these three functions to some degree. So, the generator aspect is Rajas, the operator aspect is Sattva, the destroyer aspect is Tamas. Now, the three sections of the soul also operate just like this. The tamasic aspect, the lower aspect, the dense aspect is the animal soul. And here's what I wanted to talk about, why this is so important. I don't plan on going on too long today, but this particular subject has been on my mind for quite a while, and I've just been focusing on going deeper with it. One of the main things that I've come to realize is that this animal soul isn't something to be banished. It isn't something to punish. It isn't something to run away from. The animal soul is actually the seat of the subconscious mind. Let's think about that. When we talk about the subconscious mind, what we're actually referring to is the storehouse of memory that has been built up over the millennia of existence. So I've talked about this before. Memory happens in layers. In the Vedic, we call this chitta, mind stuff, that which we create our existence and shape our existence out of, that which we build memory out of. Memory isn't purely local. Memory transcends the individual. So, on the top layer, we've got personal memory. If you continue to dig, you've got genetic memory, and this is stored in the physical body, is it not? And if you continue deeper, you'll find that this genetic memory starts to connect with what's known as the collective unconscious. And that might be the memory of the human race. And at an even deeper level, this is the memory of nature as a whole. So recently, we've been studying a book called Cyclomancy, and I had a class about cyclomancy, which is the secret to psychic power control. And a big part of that book talks about what's known as the primitive auto-conscious, right? Think about that. The primitive auto-conscious, and it talks about this being an aspect of the brain that has evolved throughout our entire evolution. And it even connects back to animals and even plants. This aspect of the mind regulates and controls the automatic functions that don't necessarily require our direct supervision, such as your heart rate, your breathing, your blinking, digestion of food, how your muscles work, the things that the body does that doesn't require the mind's attention. These things are under the control of the primitive auto-conscious. These things are under the control of the subconscious mind. And all these are just another word for the animal soul. These are all just another word for the Nefesh. So one thing that I've been working on recently is understanding the dialogue that's happening. Because what we'll find is that most people have a high percentage of their being as that animal soul, whereas the other two aspects, the self-awareness and the God soul, have a very small percentage. So people still behave like animals. But in truth, when we talk about this animal soul, what it actually is the storehouse of patterns, of repetition. So this animal soul is, it acts and it behaves through patterns, through repetition. That's why you wake up at a certain time of day, with or without the alarm clock. That's why you get hungry at a certain time of day. That's why your body behaves the way it does, specifically according to time, according to pattern. And as I begin to do meditations and work with this aspect of the self, I come to realize this is why NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is such a powerful science. Because this is the science that teaches how to speak directly to the animal nature of the human being. And because this language, this conversation, this connection with the animal self is so deeply ingrained in our being, it's very difficult to resist or bypass influence that's directed towards the animal self. Let me know if this makes sense. Let me know if you follow me so far. And if you're here, peace and welcome. Go ahead and hit that like button if you haven't hit the like button already. So peace to Sunshine Chick. Peace Lance Benefield. 2.23 Soldier. Peace. Al Dickey. Peace. Useless Familiar. Peace. Good to see you. Welcome. Hit that like button if you have not hit it already. Okay, so this is what makes NLP so powerful, is because it speaks directly to the animal. And like I said, it's increasingly difficult to resist the influence that is directed at the animal being, because as I said, it's deeply ingrained into your existence. Jay Baldale, peace. Dr. Zero Free Magic Secrets Show, peace. Hello again. Okay, so speaking of that conversation, now here's an interesting thing. When we talk about schizophrenia, they've done multiple studies on schizophrenia, and what they found is that there's a difference on how it's treated in the West and in the East. Now, the effects of schizophrenia, they display themselves based on your environment and your culture, right? So based on the environment and based on the culture, this is how it's going to be expressed. So what we find is that in the West, schizophrenia is typically seen as a negative experience. And the vast majority, if not all, the people who have taken these type of studies have reported that there are negative voices and negative conversations and negative visualizations, negative experiences, and it's not a positive thing at all. Meanwhile, what we find in the East in that same study done across multiple cultures from Africa and India and also in the Middle East is that most of people who are diagnosed with that are having experiences of conversation with relatives, ancestors, with spirits, and with gods. And that these conversations, more often than not, are positive, if not neutral, but hardly ever negative. So what we're finding is that the internal experience that's happening is heavily influenced by the culture. So what happens if someone in the West, who may have a tendency to be sensitive to subtle conversation, subtle dialogue, what happens if one's able to harness that dialogue and maybe filter it in such a way that it can be useful and appropriate as opposed to harmful? When it comes to this dialogue that I'm speaking of that happens in all of us, is that there's constantly a dialogue happening between the animal body and the human awareness. And sometimes this interaction happens so quickly, so subtly, that we term it subliminal. It's subliminal. It happens below the liminal threshold. It doesn't happen to where we're aware of it unless you're paying attention, unless you're meditating, unless you're listening to what's happening. So the animal body is going to, for the most part, demand things that are going to bring it pleasure and to avoid things that bring it perceived pain. So the animal soul is going to tell you when you're hungry. It's going to tell you what it wants to eat. It's going to tell you that it wants to have sexual pleasure. The animal soul is going to tell you when it wants to do things. And here's the thing. It isn't the specifics of what's happening. It wants the end result. It wants to be fed and full. It wants to feel that orgasm. It wants to go out and feel the sun. It wants to sit down and go into trance while you play the video games or you watch the television show, right? So the animal soul communicates with us at all times, and we hardly ever take a moment to analyze it and maybe separate it from the self-awareness. And as a thought experiment, as an experiment as a Magus, magician, witch, whatever you want to call yourself, I wonder what would happen if, when you begin to have cravings, when you begin to have desires, when there are things that you feel, emphasis on feel, when there are things that you feel like you want to do, what would happen if you were to role play and allow the dialogue of the animal self to speak to the dialogue of the human mind? And what were to happen if the two were to conversate and maybe come to agreeable terms? Like I said in the beginning of this video, it's not about banishing the animal. The animal soul is not a negative thing. In fact, if it wasn't for the animal soul, you wouldn't be where you are now. See, the animal soul is actually a genius, but it's a genius on a different level. The human awareness is a genius on the intellectual level. The animal soul is a genius on the physical kinesthetic level. The beautiful thing about human beings and the animal soul itself is that it excels at adapting to its environment. The animal soul is highly skilled, if not a genius, at adapting to its environment. Now, the animal soul might not pass a vocabulary test or a history test or any of those intellectual things, but it will definitely adapt to its surroundings to make itself comfortable. So when the animal soul is asking for something, demanding, because it rarely asks, it demands. When the animal soul is demanding something, as a thought experiment, I wonder what kind of results you would pull if you were to kind of role play and have the conversation between the animal and the human. What type of things would result from that? What type of understandings could you pull from having a dialogue with the animal body? Because remember what I said, the animal body is not a dumb animal. It's a genius. It knows how to adapt. It knows how to adapt. Now, it may not want to start a business and make a bunch of money. It may not want to go to college and get a degree. That's why we often procrastinate, because the animal body is not in accord with the human awareness soul. So you've got these two aspects of yourself that are not on the same page. And which one's going to win? The one who is stronger. And what does stronger mean? The one who's more persistent, right? The one who has more influence. For most of us, the animal soul will win that fight every time. Every time. Peace, Anamali. Peace, WVT. Peace, MC Maestro. MC Maestro says one might benefit from incorporating animalistic qualities into an image of our idealistic self. Yeah. I like what Enlightened Crypto Goon says. He says, tease it like $1 on a fishing line. That's one way to do it. But check this out. What if you respect your animal soul as the divine instrument that it is, as the divine creature that it is? See, the human soul is not superior to the animal soul. That's what we kind of got mixed up. The animal soul is not inferior to the human soul. In fact, the animal soul has been here far longer. It is far more ancient, and it is a divine thing. So what were to happen if you were to get on the same page and work together and say, hey, right? There are these things that you want. And I want them too. But there's also things that I want. How can we come to a compromise? How can we work together? Since we're occupying the same space, how can we work together in such a way that we can both win, that we can both get what we want? So I don't have to fight you and you don't have to fight me. How can we work together in such a way that we can both win? If you take that attitude, if you take that perspective, when you approach the animal soul, I guarantee you're going to get better results than if you try to whip it into shape and discipline it, right? This ties into goetic magic, right? This ties into goetic magic because when you look at these goetic spirits, what do you see? You see these combinations of animal human creatures that preside over or rule over particular experiences of life. As you know, all of magic and occult and spirituality in general is about symbolism. So what could that be symbolizing? And remember, the old texts about goetic magic talk about punishing and disciplining and threatening these goetic spirits. But what if there's a different way to work with this? Because as we know, this doesn't have to be said. It's all you. It's all you. There are no demons in hell. There are no spirits floating around waiting for you. You're dealing with symbolic keys to open up different doors and windows to the soul. And when I speak of the soul, I'm talking about this three-part being: the animal, the human awareness, and the God aspect. And here's the thing, guys. I was starting to get confused for a while doing this type of magic, because as I sit in meditation and I'm having this conversation out loud, right, with my mouth, I'm allowing the animal soul to communicate with the human soul. And what I realize is I don't know who I am in this conversation. Who am I in this conversation? Because the animal soul speaks and the human soul speaks, but which one of them is me, right? And I would assume that most people would say, oh, you're the God soul, you're the observer, but not quite. See, the God soul is something that has to be awakened when the lower two come into alignment. Yes, it's there. Yes, it's present. But your awareness of it does not happen until you build the connection. It's the same thing in yoga, right? Because remember what we said on the last study. The Ida and the Pingala, both of those nadis, right? When you see the caduceus and you see the two serpents going up the spine, the chakra points is where Ida and Pingala combine together. One of those, the Ida, is representative of the moon, which also represents the human mind. The Pingala is represented by the sun, the solar energy, which is also represented by the animal, the human, right? And it is in yoga, it isn't until those two come into balance and harmony with each other, it isn't until then that the third aspect, Sushumna, awakens. Same thing here. Same thing here. Now, we did the book study already. If you miss it, if you need the black and white, you can go check out my last 2 or 3 live streams. But you'll find what we found between Dharana Darshan, between Tatwashuti, between the Golden Dawn book by Israel Regardie, so on and so forth, even in parts of mystical Kabbalah and the books that we've been reading from W.E. Butler. All those books point to this information and how this lower animal self and this middle human awareness must work together in order for the God aspect to be realized. It's always there, but it's a different story when it's realized. That's why it's called realization. That's why it's called enlightenment, because the connection is finally made. And then you stand in a place that is above and beyond what Dharana Darshan called elemental consciousness. You stand above and beyond the animal nature and even the human nature. See, right now we're not above or beyond the animal nature or the human, damn sure not the animal nature. Look around and tell me one person who's above that animal nature, right? When the conscious conversation stops, when the phone is put down, when you're finished being seen as conscious and holy, you go right back to the animal, don't you? Whether it's food, sex, rest, when nobody's looking, you go back to that animal state. That's how it is. But the goal is to be able to transcend not the need to do that, but to transcend the trap, the clutch, right? That heavy magnet. We're not able to escape that whirlpool. In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, they talk about the samskaras. See, it's a samskara. It's a magnetic experience. It's a whirlpool that pulls us down, and it's extremely difficult to get out of that whirlpool. Remember, the samskara means whirlpool, pattern. And what I said earlier is that the animal nature operates off of habits and patterns. Same information, different language. So again, it's not about beating down or disciplining or fighting the animal nature. It is not your enemy. It is you. And it's probably your best friend and your best asset that you have. Because the animal mind is an expert at adapting to its environment. And you need that. You need that. No matter where you'll put a human being, in the ice, in the desert, in the jungle, in the city, it will adapt to survive as best as it can. Now that's done without the human mind, the awareness, the human soul aspect. But working with is how you bridge that gap. Remember also, in the book that we were reading recently, it talked about how the space between the animal soul and the human soul is the first abyss, and that's called the Veil of Paroketh in Kabbalah. You'll find that between Yesod and Tifereth, right? Yesod represents that animal nature. Tifereth represents that human nature. Now the next veil, the next abyss that's even deeper than that first one is the abyss called Doth. And what is Doth? Doth is the space between the human soul and the God soul. Doth is that gap. Now, it's incredibly difficult to cross that gap, period. But in order to make that journey, one has to leave behind all the human stuff and all the animal stuff, and you'll find that what remains. What I said before was, if you want to find God, you've got to leave yourself behind. You'll find God when you remove all of you. When you're not there, you'll see God. That's the key to crossing that abyss. So, that's what this video was about. Recognizing the fact that, yes, there is an animal aspect of the soul, and no, it is not the enemy. In fact, it would behoove you to learn how to get it onto your team, onto your side, to make it a partner, to acknowledge it as the genius it is. Because instead of fighting this thing, you might find that it has resources, ways, methods, and habits that the human mind, the awareness, the Ruach, can utilize to complete this great work that we're all trying to do. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. And it's going to be good to understand that the animal mind operates differently than the human mind. The animal soul operates differently than the human soul. They operate on different terms. Same experience, different operating system. So be open, be lenient with yourself, right? Don't try to force one or the other. Seek to understand. That would be my advice. When you go through your life and you're trying to break habits and you're trying to start new habits, you're trying to achieve your goals and do all types of wonderful things, acknowledge the aspect of the self that is the animal and acknowledge the aspect of the self that is the human, right? And try to learn and understand the different language, the different communication styles, right? The animal mind is going to communicate primarily through auditory, which is hearing, visual, which is seeing, or kinesthetic, which is feeling. Primarily, the animal body is going to communicate through one of those channels. Learn what your channel is, because you can use that to communicate back. You get what I'm saying here? Does this make sense? Let me know if this makes sense. Because, like I said, the science is already out. There's a million books about how to influence this animal body, this physiological creature. It's a science. It's a whole branch. There's neurolinguistic programming, there's neurosemantics, and many, many other branches that can teach you specifically how to influence the animal nature. And many of those sciences are based on this Qabalah, are based on this very same work, this very same teaching. And if you're interested in that, I would highly recommend going out to learn what NLP is all about. If you're not, that's fine, but at least understand your own language, understand yourself. Good stuff, good stuff. Got to befriend the animal self. Absolutely. Absolutely. Because look, would you rather be at war and be at odds with this permanent roommate? Or would you rather have everybody sharing the chores, sharing the workload, helping each other out? Beautiful, beautiful. Vera the ET says, thanks, Trav. Got exactly what I was looking for. Awesome. Awesome. Lance Benefield says, speaking high magic, Trav. Yes, and putting it in some regular language. Because, like I said, this is a journey that we're all on. Relax You Good 11. Peace. Relax You Good says, is doing yoga the real therapy that everyone should be doing? I would say so, most definitely. Choose a branch of yoga that aligns closely with your temperament. Because remember, yoga is not just stretching. That's called Hatha yoga. That's one of the 8 branches. There's mental yoga, there's emotional yoga, there's all types of yoga. Find the one that suits your temperament the best. All right. So yeah, understand that, just a quick recap of this whole thing. The human body itself belongs to nature, belongs to Prakriti. It's not going anywhere outside of this reality, right? So if you think about astral traveling and ascending and all that other stuff, the body will never leave Prakriti because it is Prakriti. It's made of Prakriti. It can't leave Prakriti. No more than your heart can leave your body, right? Your heart is not going to evolve and just transcend out of your body. That's not how it works. The body itself belongs to this plane, and it is created out of earth substance. In fact, that earth substance has been evolving since the beginning of time, right? Different pieces at different times used to be soil and water from a stream, and a donkey over here and a turtle over here and a dinosaur, if those ever existed. And the process of time has caused all those different molecules of matter to merge and separate and merge and separate until at one point you became this thing in your mother's womb, and now you are living inside of a human body. That human body has its own history, it has its own memory, and memory is data, memory is pattern, memory is soul, animal soul. So this is where we get instincts from. Instincts come from the pattern and repetition of that same type of creature doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. That's the animal soul. That is instinct. It's not intuition. Intuition comes from a different place. But instinct comes from the animal soul, and that is based on memory and repetition. And all that comes from the fact that this flesh has always been here in some way, shape, or form. And this isn't just made up crazy stuff. Even science and biology will tell you that the DNA stores the memory and the data. The DNA stores the memory and the data. So this is all the animal soul. What I'm saying here is that this animal soul has its own desires. It has its own wants and needs and fears and loves. The animal soul is its own entity. Yes, it is. And if you don't believe me, right, you think about free will. I can do whatever I want. Where do those wants come from? Where do those wants come from? There's a reason why you're procrastinating. There's a reason why it's hard to quit smoking, hard to quit drinking, hard to quit doing drugs, hard to stop eating sugar, right? Hard to keep going to the gym. There's a reason why it's difficult to do these things, because they fall outside of your pattern. Because the human body is saying, oh, pain, I don't like it. The animal soul is saying, pain, I don't want any of it. There's an example right there of how this being speaks. Now, what I'm also saying is that it's not an evil thing, it's not a bad thing, it's not your enemy. It must be listened to and learned and understood so that you can work with it. The next aspect is the human soul, the human consciousness. Once an individual has incarnated enough times as a human being, you start to develop humanity. It doesn't just come with being a human, it is grown over time. It's grown over time. And this humanity, this human nature is grown, and the purpose of it is so that it can seek what is higher than it, which is God, which is consciousness, which is whatever word you want to call it, because it doesn't matter. This higher aspect is what the human soul is seeking, whether it knows it or not. But eventually, when the human soul is ripe enough, when it's ready enough, it's going to come into the awareness of Qabalah or some type of yoga. We might as well just say some type of yoga. Once the human soul is ready to evolve, it's going to fall into one of these ancient sciences, one of these original ancient sciences, because those ancient sciences are the only place that you're going to find the keys to reach that higher self. Now, there may have been other systems that work, but I guarantee if you do your research, you'll find that they have been rooted and pulled out of yoga. Yoga, Samkhya, Vedanta, these ancient systems that have been here for thousands of years, longer than anything else. The point is union, alignment with these different aspects so that the split soul becomes one soul. Then it's ready to blossom and it's finished with this experience. Y'all talk about, I want to leave the matrix and not come back. That's how you do it. When the animal soul realizes its place, when the human soul realizes its place, and then they therefore realize the God soul, that's when you leave the matrix, because you don't need it anymore. Until you reach that point, you need the matrix to evolve, to keep gathering experiences and gathering patterns so that you can evolve. But once you hit that point, you don't need to be here anymore. You've graduated. You're good to go. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. So it's not about any man-made rules. Oh, you can't wear wool and linen at the same time, or You can't do this on Sunday or that. Like, all that stuff is appealing to the human mind. It is not total. It's not whole, right? The truth deals with everything. The truth is wholesome. The truth speaks to everything and excludes no one. Speaks to every aspect of existence. But something that only speaks to a partial aspect is only a partial truth, if that. Lee Jones says the exit is the Christ consciousness. Absolutely. Absolutely. Enlightened Crypto Goon says the animal soul wants to draw blood, the ultimate urge. Maybe. There's a lot of different animals, right? There are predators, carnivores, there's prey, there's omnivores, there's different kinds of animals, right? You might have been a predatory animal. Someone else might have evolved from an omnivore type of prey animal. Sometimes the animal wants blood. Sometimes the animal just wants to eat, just wants to sit around and eat all day. Sometimes it wants to just fuck all day. There's different kinds of animals and different kinds of temperaments. But the answer is the same. Understand it, learn it, discipline it. And when I say discipline, I don't mean spank and punish. I mean teach it new patterns. Teach it new patterns. The same way you can train a dog, you can train a monkey, you can train an elephant, you can train a lion, right? You can train an animal because the animal soul is a pattern-based recognition system. So when I say discipline that animal soul, what I'm saying here is teach it useful and appropriate patterns. I got the hookup. Holler if you hear me. Okay, all right. Well, that's a good point. MC Maestro says when people go crazy from the occult, a good portion of the time, it comes from the animal dominating. That's why I said what I said about schizophrenia, right? When this conversation, which is always happening, starts to become misunderstood, it becomes very difficult, like I said, to realize who you are in that conversation. Yeah, you know, and like I said, most people are going to be animal dominated. Because that's what this is. The human race is an animal race. It's part of the ecosystem, just like every other animal. And that isn't an insult. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. It is what it is. That's the nature of the existence that we have here. Now, as people who consider themselves spiritual, what's your job, what's your goal, what's your mission here is to realize the higher aspects of the self, to unify and connect with the higher aspects of the self, right? Right. Holy Wisdom 93 says, Travis, do you think spiritual training and practice is Kabbalah and Gnosticism, ascending from limits to grow and reach unlimits? I mean, yeah, you could say that. Spiritual training and practice is sitting still, learning how to sit still on purpose, right? That's spiritual training and practice. And watching your breath, analyzing the breath, observing the breath. That's spiritual training and practice. If you can't do those things, you're not doing anything. Not really. You might be entertaining yourself and you might be getting awesome visions, but they have to be grounded. The animal body has to be involved as well. And you're not going to get the animal body to listen and pay attention unless you're able to put it under a useful pattern. That's why doing mantra is so great, because mantra has this tendency to lull the beast to sleep, to lull the beast into this trance, right? Trance, NLP, induction of trance. Trance is how you get through to the animal soul. The same way that you can play a flute and make that snake stand upright and sway left and right. Music soothes the savage beast. That's the quote, right? So yeah, spiritual training and practice is sitting still on purpose and analyzing your breath. Everything else should be on top of that. There ain't no superior spiritual training and practice than learning how to sit still on purpose and observing the breath. Useless Familiar says, facts. I've worked in a mental hospital. I've seen a few occultists there. Holy Wisdom 93 says, yeah, I read Atman and Brahman, and yoga as a whole is straight about breath and sex. Okay, all right, so we're probably gonna wrap it up here soon. Let me know if you guys got any questions or anything like that. Because, man, I tell you, once you understand the different aspects of the self, you get closer and closer to the goal. That's why the ultimate phrase is, know thyself. What's it talking about? Know thyself. It ain't just talking about know your ego. Know as much of the self as possible. Know thyself. That includes the animal self. That includes the mental self. That includes the spiritual self. Know thyself is how you get there. That's how you get there. Every spiritual practice, every spiritual guru you listen to, every teacher, every book, all these different things that you involve yourself in, if they're not pointing to know thyself, you're wasting your time. Whatever you're involved in, that's your spiritual aspect of reality. If it's not pointing to know thyself, you're literally wasting your time. Discover the Hero Within says, I'd choose watching your channel over a Super Bowl any day. Good choice, my friend. I don't have the cool commercials, but I got everything else. Straight Panther, peace, brother. Bakuri Hero says, what practical habits that we can implement on a daily basis to help the process, or what is yours? Like I just said, number one, learning how to sit still on purpose. You can call that meditation. Sit in one position for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. Make that goal. Sit there. Do not move at all. And just observe. That's hard. That's difficult, isn't it? That's terrifying to some people. I know some people who say that they'll never do that, right? That's the first thing that you want to do. Learn how to sit still and observe. Observe the contents of your mind. Observe the contents of your body, right? Number two, observe the breath. Do those two things together. That's what you can practically do. Because what are you doing now? You're beginning the process of disciplining that animal body. You're also beginning the process of coming to understand what it's all about. Because here's what you're going to see when you sit still and analyze your breath. What you're going to start to notice is the animal body will begin speaking. I want this. I need that. Remember when we did this last week? Remember when we did that last year? Let's do it again. I don't like this. My knee hurts. Oh, I got a scratch. I'm itching, right? Although if you've ever meditated at all, even once, you know that those thoughts will start to pop up. Listen, I'm talking about having a communication with the animal soul. If you've never experienced that, then you don't know what I'm talking about when I say a communication between the animal soul. Like I said, it speaks a different language than the mind speaks. So you've got to listen and learn the language of the animal soul before you can even hope to talk to it, right? You can't just go out here and talk to somebody in a different country. You've got to learn the language first. So if you want to learn the language of the animal soul, you've got to sit down and listen to it and observe its patterns. Watch what it does. Look at how it reacts and what it reacts to. That's the practical advice on how to do this. I could tell you something big and fancy or whatever, but that's literally the most useful, the most appropriate, the most efficient thing you can do right now. Molly says, do you think the animals in the tarot and the constellation are clues? Absolutely. Just like the animals in the Goetia are clues. The animals in the zodiac are clues. The animals used as gods and goddesses in ancient Kemet or India or any of these cultures, right? With the eagle head, with the crocodile head, right? The elephant head. These are clues, right? And before you think that, oh, that represents the lower nature. Nah, like I told you, the Nefesh is more ancient. It's been here longer. It's more ancient, so it holds a lot more secrets than the human aspect of these gods. All right. Nuru, peace, brother. Peace. Jirin, peace. Oh, yeah. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Ali Awed says, are you satanic? Your mama's satanic. Bakuri here says, thank you. Thank you so much. Awesome, brother. Awesome. Lance Benfield says, reading is a form of meditation. Absolutely. Because when you look at the definition of meditation, it's oneness with when the observer and the observed becomes one. Oneness between the two. Lisa says, hi, Dark Sidious. You spelled both of those names wrong. Discover the Hero Within says, I've noticed that as we awaken higher levels of the soul, we tend to become less interested in worldly things. Right, and why do you think that is? What aspect is interested in the worldly things? The animal soul is. So as you become more awakened, you start to realize the higher aspects of the self. You start expanding your awareness. Remember, that human soul aspect is self-awareness. So that awareness expands. Awareness is like a flashlight, right? But you want to turn that flashlight into a spotlight so you can be aware of more things. It's difficult to remain aware of the animal body, isn't it? Right? That's why a lot of people fidget and they have what's called body language, right? And it's very difficult for most people to control their body language because their awareness isn't expanded enough to be able to process all that data, right? You're gonna flick your nose, you're gonna look left and right, you're gonna make eye contact or not. When you try to access a memory, you're gonna look to the right. If you're trying to access something that you saw, you're gonna look up to the right. If you wanna access something that you felt in the past, you're gonna look down. If you try to make up a sound, you're gonna look to the left. If you wanna make up a sensation, you're gonna look left, down. All this stuff is mapped out, literally. Body language. It's difficult to control unless the awareness is expanded enough. Again, meditation helps you to expand your awareness. You see how all this stuff lines up and connects? You see how it all lines up and connects? Ali Owed says, are you always calm like that? Your mama's always calm like that. Useless Familiar says, you helped me understand a lot. Thanks, Trav. Awesome. Awesome. Lance Benefield says, meditation is like catching a chicken. You must wait till it comes to you. Jan Pomeroy says, I was wondering what that word meant in your title meant after you had it on your story. Yes, Nefesh is the animal soul, the animal soul. Alice Cuckoo says, Trav, I wanted to ask if you still have the Amazon link for your Rudraksh. I lost them, had them in my cart. I can dig it up. I can dig it up. Woo. That means I did my meditation today. Jalen Smith says, books have spirits, you can communicate with them. Absolutely. Absolutely. Happy Days says, where would you place tongues? Happy Days says, where would you place tongues practiced by some occultists and Christians? It's like a form of mantra with breathwork. Christians call it praying in the spirit. I have seen many tap into power by it. Absolutely. So imagine the highest. Okay, so look, like I said, the body speaks its own language. The human aspect speaks its own language. So absolutely the God aspect speaks its own language. Now, the thing is, when people are actually speaking tongues and not just performing, we're talking about a communication that's coming down from the God aspect. And it's a download, and it's not able to be translated accurately, so it comes out in that way. Now, the information and data is still coming through. It don't have to be in English, just like your mantras aren't in English, but they still work. When we talk about those tongues, we're talking about a direct translation from the higher aspects of the self. Absolutely. Absolutely. 223 Soldier says, I wonder if you bring too much knowledge to the material world, they take you out the game. It depends. It's a balance. It's a balance. This information is reality, right? The reality is not a prison with prison wardens watching to punish people who bring too much. Reality is actually the truth. Now, what happens is it's a system. There has to be balance. The same way that I showed you this. You've got 33. This is where the 33 comes from. Those three aspects, a third of each. There always has to be knowledge. There always has to be ignorance. And there always has to be harmony. So if at any time something is put out of balance, then nature compensates for it. Nature compensates for it, even if that's through events or other people. Corey here says, by the way, I'm the one who left a comment on working on the thumbnails. Now I'm proud of. LOL. Just so it can attract more people to your infinite gold mine. Yes, sir. I remember you. I answered your comment earlier today. Or last night. Alright. We almost done. Yeah, Micah, good evening if I didn't say peace to you already. All right. How we doing tonight? Okie doke. Anything else? I don't think so. I'm just scrolling through the comments. 7 Beauty, peace. Thank you to my moderators, right? Thank you once again. I appreciate you all. Because if I'm in the flow of talking, I can't do it myself. But I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Things have changed in this algorithm. So, you know, there are more eyeballs and more ears. Some of them real. Some of them 99% animal soul. So I thank you for dealing with that. I appreciate y'all. Jaleel Cannon says, bro, that was fire. You just said nature compensates for it. I usually feel lost with how to carry on my magic when I get thrown off. Right, and that's another reason why, as long as we're in the work doing what we're supposed to do, there's no reason to feel like you lost it or you fell off. Nature compensates. It just might be that you need a break, that you need a rest period. But nature compensates. You have not fallen off. As long as you haven't consciously made the decision in your heart that I'm giving up and I'm not doing this anymore, which really, you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. Once you start this path, you will not get off of it. So don't worry. Relax. Straight Panther says nature is one to be in sync with that animal self, right? Especially when you see messages played out in nature according to you. Yes, yes, yes. Star Lion, peace. All right. Almost done. What can it be now? Okay, so wonderful. I hope that this was a nourishing message. I hope that you got something out of this that you can use. I hope that you will practice or at least experiment some of the things I said. For example, having a conversation with that animal soul and listening to the dialogue. I think that you might learn something about yourself if you do that. In either case, have a great evening. This has been fun. I appreciate you all. I especially appreciate my mods. Gonna have to give y'all a name for sure. But we out. Esoteric 3 Compassionist, peace and welcome. Sirius 888, peace. All right, y'all. So we out. This is TK Trav, aka Travis Magus, here with LVX777. I love you. Peace. Gatekeepers of Gibera.